Hello everyone, this lesson is on feminist views of the family. So hopefully we know something already about feminism. Ages ago we did briefly look at it, and you've probably looked at it in other subjects. It's a theory that isn't just relevant to sociology. I've put some key terms down on the bottom left. So patriarchy, we've heard of before, we've talked about that before. Patriarchy is when you have a society that is male dominated. And canalization is a new word. And this is the way parents channel their children's interests into toys and games that are seen as gender appropriate. So things like giving boys trucks and violent video games, and giving girls Barbies and dollies and kitchens and things like that. So it's giving them toys that are based around their gender, and that shapes their interests they have later on. And we'll touch on that a little bit more later. So in the yellow circle, I've got the bold writing. It says, feminists believe that family life benefits men more than women. So do you think this is true? Do you think men gain more out of family life than women do? Think of examples that might support your claim. So you might want to think about, who is it that's expected to do paid work? Who is it that's expected to do housework? And your view might depend on your own experiences of family life. So we're going to start with looking at an article that was published in Housekeeping Monthly in 1955. It's called The Good Wife's Guide. Essentially, this was an article that was telling women how to be good wives. I won't read all of it to you. You can pause the video and read some of it yourself if you like. But I want to just point out a few of the tips that are given to women. So things like, be happy to see him. Greet him with a warm smile and show sincerity in your desire to please him. Don't greet him with complaints and problems. Make him comfortable. Have him lean back in a comfortable chair. Don't ask him questions or about his actions. Make sure you're wearing makeup and that you're well presented. Clear away clutter. Have dinner ready and plan ahead. Make sure that you have a delicious meal ready on time for his return. So this is clearly a very traditional approach to family life, with the woman making sure that everything is ready for the husband when he returns from work. And you would assume from this that she doesn't go out to work herself. She is a housewife and stays at home. So do you think some of these expectations are still true today? Or do you think household chores are more equally distributed today? Also, you might want to think, I've put a challenge task there, you don't have to do this, but if you want to push yourself further, you want to make a little connection to research methods. So identify and explain an advantage of using a questionnaire to find out whether childcare and household tasks are equally shared. In the booklet that I asked you to do before Easter, there was a miniature questionnaire that asked you to design. So do you think that was a useful way of finding out what chores people did in their households or not? So just think now into your own experience. Do your parents have different expectations of girls and boys in your family? So if you've got a brother or sister, are there expectations about perhaps their behaviour, or whether they're allowed out, or when they're allowed to be out, for how long? Do they get more freedom? Do sons generally get more freedom than daughters, in your opinion? And you might think as well about how much your brothers and sisters are expected to help around the house. So do you get away with not doing household chores, but your brother or sister has to help out? Is that based on their age, or is that based on perhaps their gender? So we're linking this idea to primary socialization. So remember, primary socialization is the teaching of norms and values at home between the ages of 0 to 5. And feminist sociologists argue that family teaches gendered behaviour. It teaches gendered norms and values. So we teach what's normal and acceptable behaviour for girls versus boys. Now, feminists think that primary socialization negatively affects girls but positively affects boys. And that's because girls are encouraged to be passive, encouraged to have interests that centre around housework and childcare, whereas boys are socialised to be more assertive, more competitive, and have interests that are perhaps more linked to science, technology, construction, and things like that. And feminists think that this gives girls a disadvantage in society compared to boys. So I've got a clip that is listed here. If you're watching this presentation via YouTube, it's in the notes box at the bottom. But just click on this link and have a watch. Think about how what you're seeing is an example of canalization, so an example of giving girls toys and boys toys. And I want you to think about how girls arguably were disadvantaged by this process. So you'll see what kinds of toys the boys were given and what kinds of toys the girls were given. Why might that lead to a boy being more successful when he's older compared to a girl? So now I'm just going to take you through the different types of feminism. So there are 3 types: liberal, radical, and Marxist feminism, that you need to know for your exam. So the first one, liberal feminism. Liberal feminists focus on gaining equality through the law. So they try to make sure that laws make sure that everybody is treated fairly and equally. So things like the Equal Pay Act or the Divorce Reform Act, those kinds of pieces of law that we've looked at before, lead to more equality between men and women. Liberal feminists were angry because things like rape was not formally recognised as a crime in a marriage until 1991. And that's the kind of law that they advocate and want to change, so that things are equal between men and women in marriage, outside of marriage, in the world of work, in the family, etc. Divorce laws were reformed because in the past it was men that were able to divorce women. It was much more difficult for a woman to divorce a man. And so that it has been made equal now, so that it's just as easy. Liberal feminists argue that most of the battles for legal equality have been won. So there's lots of examples of laws that protect women and men and ensure that they're treated equally. But there is still inequality between the sexes, for example, in relation to domestic work. Lots of liberal feminists say that this has become more equal. Men are doing more household chores and women are doing more paid work, showing more equality, but it's still not equal. And there's still more that needs to be done. Radical feminists, as it says on the tin, it's more radical. They do not believe that changes in the law will be enough. You need to do a lot more to stop women being oppressed. They argue men will always oppress women and the family is a way for that oppression to take place. They believe that women should find alternative ways of living, and they go as far as saying that separatism should be a way of living for women. So this separatism is when men and women live completely separately from one another and they don't interact with one another at all. Radical feminists also argue that girls are socialized to believe that oppression and inequality are normal, and therefore girls tend to accept inequality of family life. They accept that they are expected to do paid work, housework, childcare. They're socialized to believe that it's normal that women should do most of the childcare, take longer maternity leave than men. And in fact, they believe it so much that they work for it. They dream of the marriage, the house, the babies, and those unequal roles. Now, you're probably thinking, what's wrong with that? And we'll come on to that later when we look at criticisms of feminism. And at this point, I just want to also point out that radical feminism is not necessarily the dominant branch of feminism. There are lots and lots of different branches of feminism. Usually people, when they think of feminism, they think of radical feminism because it is the most extreme. But that doesn't mean that if someone tells you they're a feminist, that they are necessarily a radical feminist. There are lots of different types. The last one that we're looking at today is Marxist feminism. Marxist feminists argue that families help to promote capitalism and patriarchy, and that the two work together, they work hand in hand. They point out that the capitalist system gets the benefit of unpaid female work as their workforce are fed, looked after and kept happy to ensure that they keep working hard and making profits for the bosses. So the man might come home from a day of work and be stressed, might feel angry that he doesn't earn as much as his boss, and the woman is there to reassure him, make sure he's okay. He calms down. He then goes back out to work the next day and is exploited all over again. So actually, women play a role in maintaining capitalism and that patriarchal family structure where the man is the head of the household. That helps to maintain capitalism too. So Delphi and Leonard are two sociologists who are described as radical feminists, and they focus on the unpaid aspect of housework. They say that the unpaid housework that is done is not related to the task itself. So if you think about cleaning a house, doing someone's washing, childcare, all of those types of activities outside of the home are paid. So if I was to clean, a hospital or a school, I would be paid for it. If I do it in my own home, I'm obviously not paid for it. But Delphi and Leonard take issue with this, and they say that it's unpaid not because of the nature of the work, but because the task is done for the husband and for the family. And they're cross with this because they think, well, the family is based on a hierarchical structure where the husband is at the top and other family members are in subordinate positions. The husband provides for the wife's upkeep by going out to work and earning the money to pay for bills, rent, etc. And he controls her labour for his own use. So he might direct a wife's time to doing household chores, childcare, etc. Because women are less likely to be in paid work or are more likely to do part-time work, they tend not to have money for their own purposes. They have to rely on their husband for financial assistance. So even when women are well paid or in full-time employment, they're still expected to do most of the domestic work and childcare. So family relationships involve economic exploitation. In other words, men use and benefit from unpaid work that the women do in the household. So their work tends to be less valued compared to paid work. They're usually more financially dependent on their husbands, and they have a subordinate position in the family. So Delphi and Leonard say the family itself is patriarchal, and families maintain men's dominance over women and children. So thinking about problems with the feminist perspective, hopefully as I was reading through and talking you through some of that, you were already thinking of, well, that doesn't sound true. So think about Delphi and Leonard's view. It's quite outdated. It makes the assumption that women are financially dependent on their husbands, and we know that in more recent times this isn't true, or it's not true for the majority of women. Is it a bad thing that children are taught gendered roles? Well, feminists seem to assume that it's a bad thing. Is it? Some sociologists, like functionalist sociologists, would actually say it's a good thing that we're taught gendered roles because women have a biologically natural role towards childcare and making sure everybody's okay, and that men have a naturally sort of instrumental role in the household, and it's natural for them to go out to work. So functionalists would definitely disagree with feminists and say that actually it's normal to be taught different roles according to gender. Do all male-female relationships lead to females being exploited? We could say that the feminist explanation is a little bit deterministic. It assumes that if you're in a male-female relationship, that the man will dominate the woman and that the woman will feel exploited and used. And we can obviously say that this is not true for all male-female relationships. And we can also say, well, it doesn't really address same-sex relationships. What would they say about that? Does it mean that if you're in a same-sex female-female relationship that there is no exploitation? What would functionalists argue about the family? How is this different to the feminist perspective? So obviously functionalists think that the nuclear family is the ideal and that gendered roles in the household are ideal because it means that the family can function properly. Obviously this is different to the feminist perspective, who rejects gendered roles. And we can say that the nuclear family is not necessarily the ideal type according to feminists, which contrasts to functionalists. So a bit true or false. So is feminism a conflict theory? Yes, it is. The conflict is between men and women. 2, canalization is when men dominate society. This is obviously false. Canalization is when Girls and boys are given toys according to their gender, which shapes their interests later on in life. 3, Marxist feminists believe that capitalism leads to the exploitation of women. This is true. They think capitalism leads to exploitation of women because women are expected to do the unpaid labour, which leads to capitalism being able to survive. And number 4, one criticism of the feminist perspective is that it's too negative and does not consider that the family has many benefits for women. And this is obviously true. Lots of women benefit from family life. If you think about the emotional support and also the joy of raising a family and starting a family, can't be ignored. So I've got 2 practice questions here for you to complete. If you could take a look at these and send your answers to your teacher by Friday the 8th of May, send them via email, please. If you have any questions, then just email your teacher and they can help you answer these questions. But hopefully this presentation will be enough for you to be able to answer these. Please remember as well, you do have copies of the textbook at home. We gave you photocopied copies, so you can use those as well if you need to. That's all for today. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye.